Let's break down game one. Celtics take it at home against Dallas, get up huge. Dallas a bit of a scare there at the end, and then Boston runs away. So what happened in this game? Is there anything to fix for Dallas? And the two things we didn't see that have to be alarming. We've got Raja Bell, more on game one, looking ahead to the rest of the series. Who would he rather defend between the two teams' duos? And we've got a little life advice for you as well. Celtics take game one of the NBA Finals. Let's run through a few different things and also a couple thoughts on Dan Hurley potentially becoming the Lakers head coach before we get to Raja. So this game got to 58-29. Celtics doubling up the Mavs. And I always expect every team to make a run if you're remotely decent, that you're going to cut the lead. And Dallas closed really well at the end of the first half, but the three-point shooting wasn't there. Boston was dominating on the boards. And then you went into the third quarter wondering, will the Celtics put this thing away in the first 4 minutes? They've been terrific. Some of the defensive stuff that I want to get to here, and that was not the case. Luka continues to go off on one-on-one offensive plays. They did not have the same flow that they had against Minnesota. There's a lot of defensive stuff that I love from Boston last night, but the offensive part of it, and Tatum struggles throughout much of the game despite the final numbers. You were like, wait, this thing's gone from 29 points to 8 points. Again, I expect teams to make a run. It's not sustainable to stay up 30 points the entire game. It just isn't, especially with the shooting variance that you're going to have from Boston throughout multiple moments. But for anyone that's watched Boston this year, you're going, uh-oh, is this going to be the stale part? Because it is stale right now on offense. How long is the stale part going to last? Well, it lasted until about 4:27 of that third quarter, where it was cut to 8. And Jaylen Brown, you've probably seen the quote everywhere, but I thought it was perfect for him and the game he played last night, where he said, quote, when they cut the lead to 8, that's when the game started. This was the Jaylen Brown game. He was fantastic. It's not just 22 points. It's him understanding. One of my favorite things I saw from him last night, like this is one of my favorite Jaylen Brown games ever, considering the stakes and everything going on, where it was attack, attack, attack. Whether it was attacking on defense, but specifically some of the stuff that he did on offense, where it's not like he went for 40 here. He didn't even go for 30. But when we look at some 30-point games of players, you're like, oh, that guy had 30. Like that was kind of a quiet 30. I thought it was an incredibly loud 22. And then you have the defense. There was a stretch there where it felt like he was doing everything and being the aggressor on offense. But then a little later in the quarter, there's a lob attempt that he blocks. And then the Mavs player regains control of the basketball. He blocks that again. And then he gets Kyrie with another block on the baseline. And you're like, this guy is taking over on top of the stuff that he was tasked with by being the primary defender on Luka, where you know Luka's going to end up going up against a bunch of different people, considering all the pick and roll stuff that they're going to do. But Jaylen was doing some early work here defensively just to make it harder on Luka. And if that continues to be the game plan, we'll see how Luka holds up against it, because Luka's still going to get his points, but it's the difference. It's kind of like the Lou Dort versus Minnesota thing. Is the 30 really tough? Well, against Lou Dort, I think there were times where it was really tough for Luka to get his numbers. And against Minnesota, I thought there were times it was just way too easy. So Jaylen Brown ends up with 22, 6, and 2. But again, like I said, it was a loud stat line for him, just understanding some of those moments during that staleness of I need to step up my aggression here, because Tatum didn't have it. Tatum ended up with 16 points. He was 6 of 16. The 6 turnovers were brutal. He just was uncomfortable. He had 11 boards. He had some assists. He is pretty good on the drive and kick stuff of keeping some of the plays alive. And with the three-point shooting, with him collapsing the paint, there's still a benefit to him driving. But I'll look for it in game 2, because it was definitely part of the game plan for Dallas. It seems like on Tatum drives, he is facing all sorts of traffic once he gets into the rim. So there's times Tatum could probably just say, hey, I need to go up and at least make the shot attempt. And I know there's a couple times. Look, anybody who has the ball as much as Tatum's going to have a few drives where they feel like they should have been at the free throw line. But I'm not going to use the officials here for an excuse to Tatum. He just had a bad game, and the turnovers were part of it. I wouldn't expect him to play like this for an entire series. Porzingis was the story early on. Lit it up in the first half. Checks in. Hadn't played in 38 days. You kind of wondered, can you just go out there and play game 1 of the finals, play that kind of intensity, and be a real impact? And he was all of that. was almost like the Celtics from that first half added a top 5 player in the NBA. Like, oh yeah, like that's how well he played. Because it wasn't just the offense. He had 11 points, 2 blocks, 3 rebounds in the last 5:24 of the first quarter, hit 5 of 4 of his shots. But he also was getting into some of those switches where some of the stuff that he can do, it looks like everybody's just kind of waiting around to figure out if he's going to take a shot over the smaller defender. But at 7'3", it just is a great look for him, especially with his shooting touch. And he was hitting all of that stuff. He had a couple threes, but I think the defensive stuff that he was doing was just as impressive. I'll get to some of the lack of lobs here in a second. But for Porzingis, when you watch him, when he retreats against a drive, he's retreating playing the contest. He doesn't want to come up and stop your drive. He's almost inviting you to drive in. Jaden Hardy had a drive against him because Hardy just is not as athletic as he is, as impressive as he's been in some of these big moments in the playoffs, and he's Mr. Garbage Time. I can't even believe he passed the basketball when he came in and the Mavs waved the white flag at like 5:17, which Boston was pretty much in control of this game other than when Luka kind of went off there in the third quarter and cut it to 8. But Hardy comes in, shots are just going up. They're going up. But Hardy didn't understand Porzingis' capabilities defensively. So Hardy's thinking with his athleticism, like, I'm just going to go right at this guy and kind of turn. And Porzingis is backpedaling, arms up, sizing it up the whole time, like welcoming you into that attempt. And somebody like Kyrie that's more refined and understands the opponent probably a lot better than Jaden Hardy ever does. And of course, Luka, who I still think, oddly, because you're just so used to him playing almost perfect basketball. Luka, I thought, was those late finds Legs and I were talking about a couple weeks ago and how impressive they are, these deep drives. You're like, is he going to go up? It's like, wait, he just turned his body like 270 degrees and then threw it out to somebody. And granted, when you're stationed outside on the perimeter, some of the passes, I don't want to say like they're not as impressive, but it's not as if Luka doesn't understand where everybody's supposed to be around him, but that he can find them so late on the drive. And you think there's no way he's actually going to pass out of this movement. He has to get the shot up. There are a few more times, I think, than I've seen in an entire game where Luka looked like he was held up. So I don't know if that's part of the Porzingis thing as well. But his defense, the way you think you have him and you don't, adds a completely different layer to this Boston defense. So let's look at some of the stats. The Mavs had 0 assists in the third quarter. So they're making this run. And I don't care who you are. And maybe it feels like it's a little different with Boston because they're so 3-point heavy that when they're stale offensively, which every team has stretches in any game for the most part, where you're like, oh, what's going on with their offense? There's not as much movement. I mean, this is just basketball. It's what happens. I know it's frustrating at home on the couch when it's happening to your team, but I've heard people complain about it as if it's a decision that is made. Hey, let's just be real stale. But also, I think when you get up 29, 58-29, you're not going to be playing with the same kind of passion. And that's why basketball coaches are the most insane human beings ever, because they're seeing it as well, going, why did we stop playing? It's like, man, it's human nature. You're never going to defeat human nature inside of a basketball game. So the Mavs are putting together this run, but they're putting together with absurd, like this stretch of one-on-one play where you're like, okay, so there's a couple different factors here. And then the Jaylen Brown stuff happens on offense and on defense, and they run away with this one. The Mavs had 9 total assists in this game. That's the lowest total for a team in an NBA Finals game since Cleveland had 9 in Game 1 of the 2007 NBA Finals. But that there wasn't this reckless scrambling by Boston defensively. Like, they liked how they played it straight up. That part is alarming because it took away from Dallas the assist plays. It took away the corner 3 attempts. Dallas had 3 attempts from the corners for the entire game. Josh Green's the only one that made one, and that was the late one off of a Hardy pass, which, again, I still can't believe Hardy made that pass, because when he gets in, shots are going up. Lobs. We know that part of Dallas has been unstoppable. It wasn't even noticeable last night. It was only noticeable that it wasn't happening. Was there one good one and then maybe one other kind of weird one that happened? I don't know what the final official lob count is, but it was not a part of Dallas's offense. So you have Kyrie, who doesn't have a great game, goes 6 of 19. And I went back through it. I don't know if we touched on this with Bill, but I was wondering, hey, could I find something in here where if the crowd really gets on Kyrie, will Kyrie start talking back to them? Can that take him off of his game a little bit? I do think Kyrie in past playoff games has had moments where he feels like I'm just going to do something here. And it can be a little bit on his own. It can be outside of what they're trying to do. And he's so capable of doing pretty much anything with a basketball that you would almost allow it. But I know that I've seen moments with him where I go, I think he's just doing this now because he wants to do it. So I wondered, is there any history here with his games at Boston that shows that it's below the normal Kyrie standards? It isn't. He's had some monster games in that place after he's left Boston. He's had 2 39-point games. I think both were in the playoffs. So maybe one was in the regular season. The point is there was nothing there. There was no evidence there. So you can't go in, first game in Boston. And he had even said, and I think Boston was just so amped up in general that they weren't going to – that crowd was unbelievable at the start of that game. My God. But I don't think it was just because of the Kyrie. It was almost like the Celtics fans were like, oh, wait, Kyrie now has the ball. Like, let's make sure we boo him again. And it didn't seem as targeted as maybe one would expect. So I think Kyrie just had a bad shooting night, which is going to happen to literally everybody here. So when you think about the lack of the lobs, the corner threes, like, okay, so what else is happening here? Boston attacked Luka more in switches, I think, earlier in the game when they were trying to establish some of the stuff that they wanted to do. Maybe they got away from it just because it didn't seem to be as much of a priority in the second half. I'd have to go back and look at some of that stuff, but the game wasn't logged this morning for the way that I can watch it again in the morning. So I didn't have that for you. I apologize. But I couldn't help but thinking about Minnesota a few different times in last night's game because Minnesota didn't attack Luka nearly enough. And you could talk about the defensive assignments and the alignment, Luka being the low man, and maybe them not wanting to go through that, but it just didn't feel like that was a priority. And one of the things that you always thought with Dallas is like they're putting together this incredible defensive run as they close the regular season and the stuff that they're doing in the playoffs. But if it's Kyrie and Luka out there, we can talk about the effort and the improvement from Kyrie of just being locked in off the ball more now than he has been in the past. But can't you still win some of these one-on-one matchups against these players that we know are average at best on defense? And I think Boston did a better job of that. So I don't know if that combined with Jaylen Brown picking him up around half court and trying to slow him down and getting into whatever he wants to get into leads to a more tired Luka at the end of the game. It's kind of like running the football. We may not get 5 yards on every one of these carries in the first quarter, but we need to throw these body blows. So I feel like that's the body blow of this matchup by trying to get Luka more involved defensively. The other part where I thought about Minnesota is here you have Gobert in Towns, who was really good against Jokic because it's more in front of him. It's more stationary. He doesn't have to react athletically as much against Jokic, but Jokic is still going to get his stuff going, right? But I thought he at least fought in that matchup better, despite the stupid fouls, than he would in, say, a different kind of matchup. But then you have Gobert off of Gordon, and yet it felt like Minnesota was helpless against the lobs, whereas Boston with Porzingis was just a lot better, or because they didn't double as much, the lob just wasn't as available, which again seems crazy that, wait, Boston doesn't have to double as much, but yet Minnesota with all these perimeter defensive options, it's not that I don't think they were doubling Luka a lot. It just Luka worked them on the first move, and then he just kind of dictated everything once he had Jaden McDaniels on his hip. Sam Hauser attacks 0 for 3, and I thought the fourth one was a tough foul call on him. Sam Hauser gets into the game. Let's go at Sam Hauser. And guess what happens? Hauser holds up, stays in position. Doesn't mean no one can hit a shot against him, but it's just always funny to watch. And you think, okay, we're in the NBA Finals. You've done all of this prep, whatever. But Hauser still is probably the best option depending on who else he's out there with. You can see Pritchard where it looked like, okay, Pritchard's out there. Let's try to target him. You saw Luka get some of those matchups a few different times. So I wonder how many minutes Pritchard will play moving forward. If there's a close game, I don't know if Boston's going to want to attempt to see him out there defensively and exposing him a little bit because it looked like Dallas noticed it immediately. There's one play here that I absolutely love because Horford's going to be targeted a lot, but Horford was doing an incredible job on contesting Luka on these threes once he got stuck with him on the switch. There was a timeout in the second quarter. they decide to come in, aligning it where the ball's on the right side, but they want Luka on the left side and they want him off the ball. And they're going to run him through the paint from the left side for a catch on the right side, hoping to either get a switch on a smaller player so he can get a really deep catch. And at that point, it doesn't matter if it's Drew and certainly not Derek White. If Luka is deep and positioned with the basketball, those guys are going to be in trouble despite Drew's stoutness. It's just not enough. Horford sees it, switches it, and then you're thinking maybe if Luka on this play gets Horford in a switch, you're like, cool, now we have Luka on the weak side because I think they had stationed the other three on the other side, and now he can go to work on Horford, and it's not straight in the middle of the paint. Some of that side-to-side stuff you'll hear coaches talk about all the time, like we need to get side-to-side. We need to get this ball. We can't just go straight into it every single time. And so there's the two options they're hoping where Luka gets a deep catch against a smaller defender, or he's got Al weak side and it's one-on-one away from the rest of the traffic. And Horford reads it perfectly and still almost steals the pass to Luka. Like that's one of those plays you're like, man, these guys are absolutely locked in. It's game one. I doubt Dallas is going to have that bad a night from the corner, but the doubles are not there. And the random times they did send a second defender, Luka was kind of late and it was like more disruptive, or it was something that was happening at the rim where Luka had the ridiculous shot where he made it against four guys. There's always different things you can pick from. Say, well, Dallas is going to shoot that poorly from three. Yep. You could also say Tatum's probably not going to have that bad of a game moving forward. Porzingis isn't going to be Will Chamberlain for the entire first half, but Dallas has got to figure out, I'm not going to overreact to the first game and say, okay, there's just no chance. There's just no chance because I just have too much respect for Luka on that one. A couple minutes here on Danny Hurley, potentially to the Lakers. So this story has taken quite the turn based on the way I just like talking to guys and, hey, what do you think about JJ? What do you think about, and JJ and I are friendly, but it's not like we're talking about the Lakers part of it all. And it felt like people were kind of landing on that. And then you could go back and go, wait, Woj seemed to be kind of quiet throughout this entire time. Is that because Woj was looking at it as, hey, I'm a coworker of JJ, so maybe I'd stay out of it a little bit? Or what is more likely here, as Woj just continues to prove that he's the biggest deal in any team sport when it comes to breaking this stuff. And I would debate that with anyone, that he knew the entire time. And that's why he wasn't saying that much about the constant JJ Redick updates. You got to imagine that he, in the Hurley family, considering Woj's background, where he's from, who he's written about, that he's incredibly close. So Hurley's out here in LA Friday. By the time you listen to this, maybe we have a different announcement, but we'll see what happens here, right? Now let's ask the bigger question is like, what do you actually think of it? I think anybody that loves basketball loves what Hurley's done at UConn. I was at that Stetson game where they won by 39. And I couldn't believe how hard Castle was playing defense off the ball when they were destroying that team. This UConn team, and it's not the back-to-back titles. It's just watching them play going, they are so aligned with their coach and they feel like they owe it to him to continue to play this hard, right? That's like big time stuff. Now, does that work in the NBA? There'll be things that he does. There's no way he's going to work in the NBA. He's just not. And the LeBron part of it makes it even weirder because LeBron can love what he does on offense, as we saw in that clip that he had, ironically, with JJ Redick. But LeBron still kind of runs the show. So is it about anyone that grows up in basketball being like, I could be the Lakers head coach? You say yes to that. If the money, as we've seen post Monty Williams, has changed the market where we're starting to talk 8 figures to start a year, and you go, okay, I do this the one time, and now I've really set up my family for generational wealth. And I get to live in Manhattan Beach, which has turned into a coaching fest out here. I saw Harbaugh the other night, met up with Muss, see how we do with USC. Excited for him to be in town. Anybody that's ever moved out here doesn't go, man, I regret moving out here. So I don't know if Hurley's going to move down the street or not, but you get the point. Like there is something to whatever you think or assumptions you have about LA. There are always pockets where you're like, okay, I could probably do this. And if you're a lifer in basketball, it's the Lakers. But I'd have to think his day-to-day intensity would have to be handled in a different way for a group of Lakers that are pretty established guys, and specifically LeBron. Because I'd argue, and I don't think this is wrong, I'd argue that LeBron's history is that, would you say he takes to coaching? I would offer up numerous examples to say eventually there is a divorce there, and he'll think that the coach just wasn't good enough. Maybe Hurley's resume is somebody he'd be more willing to defer to, but it's also the NBA. And Hurley could come in and be one of the best basketball minds in the world immediately. But in the NBA, that position usually doesn't lead to championships unless you have that kind of talent. So the Lakers part of it, the lifestyle part of it, maybe a whole new level of money, and the fact that he's that good of a coach. But I'm always going to have questions about, like, what do you think this does? Like, what tier do you think you are as a team with still the draft and free agency and all of this stuff has to happen? But like, what tier do you think you're at? And like, how much higher do you think you go up just because of a head coach in the NBA? And usually those tiers remain in the same slot. Raja Bell joins us. He co-hosts the Real Ones podcast with Logan Murdoch. They have an awesome Howard Beck finals preview that I still think you should check out. And they're taping a new episode today again, the Real Ones. All right, let's start with the defense. What did you see with what Boston did better defensively, and certainly what we saw against Minnesota, taking away the lobs, taking away the corner threes, and primarily the way they kind of attacked Luka to begin? What did you see?
First of all, I think they match up better as a defensive unit against Boston. Just they've got more length and perimeter flexibility. They've got guards that at times, big rangy guys that can play on Kyrie at times. And even Al Horford, when they switched him a lot. Like he's able to kind of stay in front in a way that like a Rudy just couldn't. Kristaps has that length and ability to move his feet like Rudy doesn't as well. I thought they did a very good job. And I always talk about Boston, about what are you going to do, man? Like, are you going to let Luka and Kyrie kind of come down in that drop coverage, or are you going to really try to take that away and then you're springing, everything else for its ability to score the ball, and now you're trying to put out fires all over the place. I thought they did a good job of not letting Luka and Kyrie, when they played pick and roll, get downhill in a way that put you in jeopardy at the rim, if that makes sense. Like they did a really good job of corralling it earlier. That drop coverage really puts you in a tough spot because you're in no man's land as that secondary defender. You're trying to figure out whether you crack back on the big because you don't think your big's in position to get back to the lob. I thought at times Boston did a very good job. This is just strategically of not letting him get all the way downhill in that drop coverage, which pulls your secondary defender from the corner. So Luka would have to give it up a little earlier. And now he hasn't exactly made a play for a secondary player. He's just got them the ball and they have to make a play. And then they scrambled once they got out of that. They scrambled. You saw Jaylen Brown keep getting back into plays, blocking shots. It's different when they're not being spoon-fed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, I was a player that typically was spoon-fed, meaning like Steve Nash or, Allen Iverson or Darren Williams, they create the play. I just finish it. The math changes when they've got to get off of it, give it to me, and I've got to finish it and create a little bit. And I thought Boston did a good job last night of making a lot of those guys have to create a little bit for themselves.
Yeah, against Minnesota, it felt like there was things that they didn't want to give up, but they had to make a decision on what they were. Almost every matchup, you're like, okay, what are we going to give up? Last night, oddly, felt like Boston was like, we're not actually giving up any of the other stuff. We're playing so straight up with you. They're like, whatever you've had in the past matchups, it's like, okay, well, this will at least be there, or PJ will be able to go here, or Derek's going to have his moment, or Lively, or Gafford, all these things. Like, you look over the course of how that game played out, I couldn't get past just the wait. Like, there isn't the option of presenting itself right now. I expect at some point in the series is going to be this thing that Boston just can't stop that Dallas is doing because Luka is that good. But that was alarming. That part of it was alarming, where I'm like, okay, if they go back and look at the film, what are they going to point to say, okay, this was available? because Boston plays it so straight for such a long portion of the game.
Yeah, so that's a very frustrating and concerning place to be if you're the Mavericks, because you'd like to be able to go to that film and say, "Hey, fellas, look at this. Look at all of these reasons why we could very easily win game 2. We just didn't execute well." And that's why I ultimately thought Boston was going to be really, really difficult for them. And I thought a lot of this the series was going to hang on what Boston decided to look like offensively, because defensively, I feel very comfortable with them doing that. They just have pieces that put you in the space of, hey man, if you beat my best guy, Luka and Kyrie, to the tune of, let's say, like Ryan, let's say 85. Let's say between them, they have 40 and 45. But I'm suffocating all of this other stuff that really can't eat unless you spoon feed it. I feel pretty good. And so they have the type of lineup because they can control the penetration a little bit better. And on the flip side, what you saw, like, I'm sure we'll get to it, is like Dallas has been really good defensively. They could not stop the point of attack. And when you can't stay in front of the point of attack, it creates all kind of problems.
Yeah, I felt like they attacked Luka earlier, establishing things and getting him involved in the action than Minnesota. And that part of the Minnesota part of it, and I mentioned it a few times at the beginning, some people are probably like, hey, Russillo, the Timberwolves are done. That was a week ago. Move on. But I just had a lot of moments last night where I'm watching this going, why didn't Minnesota do more of this? And I know personnel is different and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like they let Luka live as the low man, and he just got to take a lot of plays off defensively. And I felt like in the first half of establishing flow and getting up, it felt like Luka was involved a lot more, and it was like a real priority for Boston on the ball handling side.
I think you can do that, Ryan, when you have basically 5 guys on the court that can get you a bucket in one way, shape, or another, right? And so that starting lineup with Boston, I mean, Drew can go at him, Derek can go at him, either one of the wings can, like, they're certified, they can go at him. And even Al Horford possesses a skill set around the block, like, where he can. So I think, again, Boston's in a situation where, first of all, they're better well-rounded offensively as a unit to be able to find him, right? Like, because they're going to hide him. Like, that's what Boston's going to do. That's what every good team does. They're going to try to, we used to do it with Steve, and people did it with Allen. Like, they're going to try to, that's too much of a load for that guy to play on-ball defense for every possession and then create for you offensively. But you've got to have the right personnel on the offensive side of the ball to hunt him out no matter what they do, and then trust the guy that he's on to be able to make him pay.
When you're trying to hide somebody, like, you can just simply go, I don't care. You can hide him all you want. I'm going to bring his man up. There was even a play last night where I felt like early on with Dallas, it's like, hey, look, they're not going to put Horford on Gafford. So if that's the screen you're looking for, there was actually a Lively play a little bit later on, is they brought Lively up to set the screen, and it was almost as if they weren't paying it. They were so used to Lively setting the screen and then playing that lob thing as Luka drives one side of the paint, and then it's like, okay, the Lively part of it's there, and then they were like, oh wait, like, we brought up the wrong guy because Horford isn't on Lively, and then they had to get out of that and then do the next thing, and now the shot clock's like ticking off. It was just one of those moments where I'm like, did you not see the defensive matchup part of that? But back to your hiding part of it, what happens in those pregame meetings with an AI or with a Nash when you know what the priority is, and you're saying, hey, we're going to hide you, you're going to hide you? Like, how do you actually successfully hide somebody knowing that they could just bring him up, unless you're going to pre-switch it or try to switch it on the fly, which leads to all sorts of other problems? I think it's a little more complicated than pulling it off.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So schematically speaking, there could be a million ways that you try to do that. Like, I mean, getting in the weeds of that would be difficult, like, without a game plan. But what I would say would be that the pregame is a lot of communication in the locker room about how we're trying to execute this, like, over communicating it. We've drilled it in practice. We've drilled it in shoot around. We've put you in these actions. Clearly we know what you want to run, like, ideally what your bread and butter is. So, like, we're going to walk that for a few days so we get the rhyme and the rhythm of it. This becomes like a dance. And the most critical part of all of it, Ryan, and you just kind of alluded to that play where you think they saw it and they didn't get it right, it's in-game communication. Like, if we're not vocal, if we don't have, like, someone out there commanding the forces defensively, like a la Rasheed Wallace with with the Pistons, even though they didn't have to hide anybody. But like that has to be in place, or you're going to have that possession or 2 or 3 where you screwed it up just enough, and now you're on the shot clock, and they got him where they want him. So you really got to be 5 people understanding the game plan and the assignment, and then on a string and communicating when you're trying to execute it.
For somebody like you, where defense was the reason you were out there, how did you manage your energy defensively versus offensively?
It's a good question. I felt I was probably 60-40 in terms of, I didn't have a hellified job on offense, especially with those Suns teams. Like I was basically sprint, which requires, a certain amount of energy. But once that happens, I'm waiting. Like I'm kind of in the corner and I become a finisher. So my job was to hold your best player, or hold is a bad word, but make him a less efficient version of himself. If he was going to score his points, they had to be volume, keep him off the free throw line. So I was probably 60-40 because I understood that was my job. Like I had to make my hay for us to win on the other side.
Okay, the reason I bring that up is I thought Jaylen Brown, that's one of the most impressive games considering the stakes and the fact that he's defensively tasked with, he was there to not stop Luka, but stop Luka from starting in a really advantageous position. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to make, from the time you touch the ball to the time you cross half court, it's going to be more difficult for you. And your starting point is going to be in a position that's just less comfortable than maybe you've had in the past. And then for him to also realize Tatum's struggling and I need to make these bucks. I spent a few minutes just raving about him. What did you think of his game last night?
Well, I thought it was fantastic. And it was a great point, and I talk about this a lot. Excuse me, when people ask me about like guarding the Kobe Bryants of the world, or even the LeBrons and the Carmelos, and what the game plan is, and it always starts with like wherever they feel comfortable and want to be. When things start happening, I need them to be 5, 6, 3. I need them to be feet off of that spot. And people probably don't put a lot of stock in that. They're like, well, what's the difference between the elbow and like, that 3 feet away from the elbow that is, that spot in between the elbow and the 3-point line? 3 feet. It's a big difference. And it becomes like they're creatures of habit. So when you see him picking Luka up in the backcourt, I think he had at least one steal on Luka back there in the backcourt. It's just taking away how comfortable a player like Luka feels in that moment. And at the end of the day, when you're in a game of that magnitude, it's who can get comfortable the quickest. Like who is going to find their spots more often and get to feeling good about what's happening. And if I can affect that, if I'm your primary defender, that's where I have to start. There's a lot more that goes into stopping you, but man, if I can get you to like not have to, you don't have to worry about me usually in a regular season game until you cross half court. Because it's the NBA, no one's picking up 94 feet. Like you get to bring it up, and now you can, well, guess what? You got to see me at 75 tonight. So we're at the hash in the backcourt, and here I am. Like I'm making you turn 2 or 3 times. Like that takes its toll, especially on a body type, kind of like Luka's, who might not be the most fit. And so I thought he did a fantastic job of that. I thought he did a fantastic job of just second and third efforts in place. I referenced a couple earlier where, that's an easy, we're up 20, Derek Jones has got this dunk, I'm low man. And this is a 70-30, I get dunked on. Like a lot of guys just chalk that up, especially up the way they were, but he's in there digging out block shots and coming across and getting Kyrie floaters. I thought he was great all over the place. And then offensively, not just picking up the slack, but the way he picked it up. Like he wasn't settling. This was timely possessions when that thing got cut to 8 or 9, whatever that was in the third quarter. And we're looking at Boston like, I'm putting my head down. I'm gonna get to cut. Make a call. Make a call, official. Like I'm gonna put you on the spot. And that's what great ones do. Like I'm not gonna settle for this jump. This would be easy. And I know I can get it off because I'm that good. But I'm gonna put the onus on somebody. Like I'm attacking the cup. And I thought he was very, very, very intent and timely with the way he contributed offensively also.
Luka was not real vocal last night, in the way that we've watched him in different parts of the playoffs where, we know how much he complains and all that kind of stuff. And I thought maybe when you're down 29, you're just like, okay, what am I going to do? Like start complaining about stuff. But when he hit the 3, cut it to 8, like you could see he was starting to feel himself. He's putting the cape on and you're like, is he going to pull this one off too? I mean, that's the kind of respect that I have for him. But with his frustrations with some of the Jalen stuff, like I didn't see him talking to him where maybe I would see him talking to somebody else. And I don't know if that was a respect thing or what, but when a player that you were like a star that you were tasked with defending, when they said something to you, did that make you feel better? Did that make you feel like, okay, now I actually am in his head a little bit more here?
Oh yeah, if you can get as a primary defender someone to start chirping with you, you've definitely gotten in. Now, what you do once you're in there is, some of those guys can let
well, can you give
in.
me a good example? Can you give me a good example of like
Kobe's the best example. Like people have seen, some of the viral clips of Kobe and I.
Sure.
And
we've covered it, so I wasn't necessarily trying to tee that one up all over again for the 7th time. But
it's all good. But like most nights, Kobe didn't say a word to me. Like didn't say a word.
Did that bother you that he wasn't even saying anything?
No, it didn't bother me because I knew like this is going to be a tough nut to crack. Like this is my job, and I got to be here all night long. And it's a lonely island to be on guarding Kobe. But when he doesn't give you anything, even when you're succeeding, like that's you're starting to wonder like, hey man, like is this going to take its toll, or is he going to hit me in the fourth quarter for these 15 that are going to win the game? Do you know what I mean? And then there are other clips where I have gotten into his head and he does chirp. Like there was an instance when I was with Utah and he hit me with an elbow and, he started yelling at the official and I was barking at the official. And, that was a really good night for me that night because like I got him and I don't know what was going on in his world, but that night he let me be a part of it. And so, yeah, as a defender, you certainly want to get that guy to start barking with you. There were other nights like, there's one in Utah where he had me all the way on tilt. Like I'm yelling and screaming at him. And it was one of those nights where he was like, yo, I'm not saying a word. I'm just going to give you 45. And I was out of my mind. And so, that's the game, right? Like if I can get you off of your spot physically and emotionally, for my team, I feel like I've done my job.
Yeah. And Luka did not have even based on the expectations, because he's actually had a couple games. It was like, I guess he's not. There was one game where they were like, he just seems to be incredibly happy. And maybe it's because they were winning and they weren't really challenged by Minnesota in the series, even though I think the games were really pretty much down to the wire, except for the closeout. But I didn't see that from him. And I thought it was just hard. It was harder work for him. It was more like the OKC series where it's like, okay, it's just going to be harder. You're still going to get your 30, but it's just going to be harder. I don't know if I should ask it this way because there's a competitive part of you where who would you rather guard, Luka or Kyrie? Because you might just say, well, I want to guard Luka because it's the head of the snake thing. But just based on your ability to survive, who would you rather defend?
Wow.
Wait, did that feel insulting?
No, not insulting. But I mean, I have that much respect for both of them as offensive weapons. And weirdly for me, I would be what you probably would call a tweener defender for them. Like I'm just a little bit probably not low enough center of gravity or quick enough to guard Kyrie effectively, but I'm too light in my ass to guard Luka, and I'm giving up 3 inches and 40 pounds. So like it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think I would probably, and this is no disrespect, I'd probably pick if you made me Luka. And that's because I'm pretty sure I can stay in front of him. I am going to get bullied a little bit, but I live in the space of like drawing that charge if you bump me one too many times. And then, if I can make you shoot tough contested step backs with my hand up and I'm not fouling you, that was what I was trying to achieve anyway. So I think Kyrie might just be too quick and too herky-jerky for me.
It sounds like the Kyrie possessions that would go bad would be far more embarrassing than just Luka having you on his hip.
Viral moments. Yeah.
All right, so let's do it on the other side. Would you rather guard Jaylen Brown or Tatum?
Yeah. Maybe Jaylen. I would have said Jaylen for sure last year because he was pretty predictable with that right hand. But like, if you saw last night where he went left, he went anchor between, or some people call it a step between, and then he went down the lane and just like unfolded at the rim. I You know what? I'll take Jason Tatum. I'll take Tatum because I think still he might settle in a way at times that I don't think Jalen settles. I think Jalen sometimes gets a little nastier and wants to put his head down and get to the rim. And I don't think I'd have success stopping either one of them getting to the rim. So it would just be a matter of if they, and honestly, like a lot of guys I guarded, Ryan, it was this simple. Like, did you ever figure out that you could just go by me? Well, if you didn't, then I'm good. But if you did, like some of those guys were like, yo, I'm not messing around. I'm just going by you. And there's not a lot you can do about that. So for that reason, probably Jason Tatum.
The Jalen handle stuff is always interesting because it's real, first of all. And I think Miami, because they're smart and they're tough and Spo's the best, and it would seem pretty simple if you're playing against the same guy over and over again and you see a weakness. But it felt like as soon as they saw Jalen try to just create a little bit more. Now, I always talk about like OG Anunoby to me had these awesome playoff games. We know what the shooting is. We know the size and all this stuff. But if it's a reset off of a screen that gets blown up and he's with the ball in a one-on-one situation allowed to freestyle, like I just don't know that he has that in him that way. Jalen has more in him than somebody like OG. But it felt like once Miami, it was just the dogs were let loose. Like, he put it down and he doesn't know where he's not dribbling with intention. He's dribbling to figure out, which makes it kind of dangerous. And now it's improved maybe to a place where I think he's going to lose it. And then he doesn't. Like he had this big kind of like sweeping dribble into the paint. And you're like, that ball feels like it's about as far away from the ball handler as it could possibly be. But the improvement may be that he's hanging on to it, or maybe we're just picking a couple of the plays because I still think it's somewhat of a concern. So I would always think like Jalen would be the guy that you'd pick if you could pick between the two. But the Tatum settling part of it is real, and he's just going to get a little 3-point happy at times, and he's going to get in that triple threat and take that 17-footer extended from the elbow, and he hits enough of it where it's super frustrating to go up against it, but at least you know he's not going to get you in a foul trouble the way Jalen is. I'm not sure. Look, again, I'm not the guy that has a defendant, so I'm not sure that I agree quite yet. But go ahead.
Yeah, but that's so. There's a lot that goes into like picking who you want to guard, or like, but let's say we are facing the Celtics and Mike D'Antoni or someone comes to me and says, "Hey, who do you want tonight?" Right? Like, it is about skill set for sure, right? Like if I can predict what you're going to do and take one hand away, but like. I feel like I have an advantage there, but it's also about what can I bait you? What's your mindset and what can I bait you into doing? Right. And so and Jason Tatum is like much more well-rounded with the ball in his hand and has a plan and has mid-post work. Like he's more, I think, of a true 3-level guy like right now. But if I space him, I know what he wants to do. Right. Ultimately, he'd rather shoot it. So if I bait you with this little bit of space, I feel like over the course of time, you're going to settle for a lot of those. And, at some point, we just got to play the averages of me contesting these shots and you shooting long jumpers and how much more beneficial that is for our team than if you would just say, I'm putting my head down and try to attack your hip. And the foul trouble that comes with that, not just for me, but for the big that's at the rim, for what it does to our defense in terms of collapsing it. If someone thinks I'm beat, and then what he can do in terms of spraying the ball out for other shooters. So, I said Tatum not out of a lack of respect or true respect necessarily for Jalen's full bag, but just I think he gets in a mode sometimes, Jalen, that is of like, I'm not fucking around with you. I'm just coming at your hip. I'm going right at your hip, and I'm athletically gifted, so figure this out. Where Jason Tatum sometimes is like, I am just a supreme scorer that I'm going to make this shot eventually.
Yeah, and Jalen just abused Lively there at the end, getting him in foul trouble. Okay, did you see anything specifically that Dallas was doing for Tatum where he ended up hitting some shots there later? He had a couple threes, but it wasn't a good game. Like it's not the game you'd expect. He only went to the free throw line one time. He was 3 of 7 for threes. The rebounding was good. I would agree with you. I think his playmaking part of it adds another layer to what he can be offensively versus Jalen. I think once Jalen has the ball, it's kind of like that's what the possession is going to be. Anything you saw that they were doing against Tatum in particular?
I thought they did a really good job of zoning up behind whoever was guarding him. They were flooding it. I mean, they were in a true, it looked like they were man. And then if he'd get it on the wing, it looked like a true 2-3 zone. Like they weren't even disguising that. And so, that kind of ties into what I was saying, right? That's the space that that Dallas is operating in. Okay, what would deter him from saying I'm getting at the rim, and whatever that looks like, building the wall behind it, flooding with the opposite big, so it's a 2-3 zone now. It deterred him in a way, and you talked about the Lively situation late in the game where Jalen was like, "Look, I don't care if he's in there. I'm throwing my body into him, and I'm gonna make the ref make a call on that." That's what I thought they did a good job of, and it affected Jason Tatum a bit. So I'd like to see him as the series continues. Like, look, you're gonna have to take some hits. They were letting them play last night. It was physical. It's going to be punitive to be in there in that way at times. But we need it as a Celtics team. And I thought he figured it out, Ryan. I thought he was attacking, but his attack was in a lot of instances very telling from the outside watching. It wasn't an attack to score as much as it was an attack to spray the ball. And that's cool until those dudes aren't making shots, and then we got to get you to attack to score the ball.
Yeah, it felt like as I was previewing everything, I'm going, okay, this is a lot like the Ant stuff that he was seeing. And then it's like, well, we don't care about any of the other stuff. I mean, if Cat is just average from 3, that series is totally different because his first 3 games, going back looking at his attempts, I'm like, man, these are so many good looks.
Yep.
And he was just awful. Okay. And if that's going to happen, then they don't have any chance. But as far as Conley on the other side, McDaniels on the other side, Alexander Walker on the other side, they're just like, whatever. Kyle Anderson, doesn't matter. We're helping off of him. We're helping off of Rudy. And Tatum has to be better shooting. Tatum has to be better on the turnovers. But you're right. Like thinking about some of those possessions, like where did those guys come from once Tatum thought he was beating the primary defender? And now if you're going to load up that way against him and it goes to somebody else, it's a whole different class of offensive player in comparison to what, Chet in theory was a stretch 5, but what was he going to do? Take 11 of them?
Right.
Dallas just wasn't going to care about it enough.
Yeah, that's why Boston is something completely different for Dallas and what they've tried to do for this entire playoff run is they have. That's why they're the deepest team. That's why pretty much universally people say they're the deepest team in basketball. And you usually hear that about someone offensively or defensively. Like we say, Minnesota is this great defensive team, but like this is the team where you could point to them and they're all individually really good defenders. They all individually are buckets. And so, it'll be interesting to see what Dallas decides to do, right? I always say
let's go there. Let's go there because I hate watching just one game and then thinking, hey, this is how it's going to look when we've been all doing this long enough to know that's just not the way sports work. So let's talk about like the Dallas improvement part of it. So I interrupted, but I want you to just kind of hammer this part of it.
No, it's okay. I think if I were Dallas, I don't think I would abandon the strategy completely right now. I think I'd tweak it though. Like what they were doing, Dallas was like predetermining that this was going to be a 2-3. As soon as he caught it, we're shifting into 2-3 formation. And it's like, an early indicator. It's like defensively, like you want to give a guy a pre-snap look as a quarterback, right? And then you want to roll that coverage as he's in his drop. So like he's making these decisions while he's moving. Like if you show the rotation before he snaps the ball, anybody worth their salt is going to pick you apart. So like if I'm Dallas, it's more about that. Like, look, guys, we were doing this early and we were exposing it too early. He's going to pick us apart with that. They're too good. So I'm going to play this cat and mouse game if I can. It's easier said than done of, hey man, we're not going to show it to you. We know that in like spirit, we're going to come over and like catch you around the rim, but we don't want to just be there sitting and waiting so that he's watching the secondary defender making a third level read as he's driving the ball. And maybe start the game like that, Ryan, and then have in my back pocket the complete pivot, which is like, all right, if those guys are hot, because if they're not making shots, you're in a good space there. Like that's what you want. Primary offensive player, not able to get downhill. These guys aren't making shots. But if they are cashing out again, then listen, guys, we're just going to kind of make it look like we've loaded up. But as he gets in that drive, instead of coming and collapsing on it, we're going to stay home. And let's see if he's good enough to make this read here, which is like, yeah, I see them. I'm picking this ball up, thinking pass. It's so hard to pick a ball up thinking pass and then try to score. So like, let's try to confuse him like that. Like, we're going to be in help. We're going to be in help. We're going to be in help. As soon as he goes to pick it up, we're getting home, and then make him a finisher. But that's going to be the chess match. I don't have the right answer.
The reason I point out game one is just how often in a series where I was like, remember what we all thought after game one, and then it went the entirely different way. How did you feel with the Sixers when you beat the Lakers in the finals in game one?
We were good, man. we felt like we had that one in the bag, and it does. It flips really quickly, especially if you have great players and great coaching. They have both, and I mean, I can't imagine that a Kyrie looks the way Kyrie did last night. And, Luka's just too good. So, it could very easily shift if they get the right recipe to stopping Boston. And here was the other thing, Ryan, and I know you didn't ask me, but this is what makes it really difficult when you're trying to guard Boston when they play like they did last night, which is decisive, quick, and not standing. When they do that, the weapons can all be at their best. When they stand and get stagnant and then start dancing on the ball, it's not that they shoot all those threes, right? The people say, oh, they live and they die by the three, so if they get cold. For me, it's not about that. It's about the type of three they get. Is it a three off of a downhill, I collapse your defense, the ball sprays, and now it starts rotating? That's a great three. Versus the stagnant, we're going to sit there and dribble it 9 times and then shoot a step back.
Yeah, I write down different things where I put like a stale warning because I've watched it enough this year. And I also think it's just unfair because who plays locked in, crisp off-ball cutting? Like even with the finals, why is that true? Because I know it's true. And anybody's like, oh, they've decided to just not do any of these things. I'm like, that's kind of what happens in every game with every single team. I'd argue they take too many bad threes for a team that has as many options as they do. If you want to be a bad offensive team where it's like, this might be the best look we even get, so I'm just going to throw this one up here from a contested corner three with like 16 seconds left on the shot clock. Bad teams, I get it. They're too good to still take the 5 to 7 threes a game. I'm like, why did you take that one? But again, you have to kind of sign up for all of that. But when it comes to staleness, no team decides to be stale, yet it happens. What is that?
It's a byproduct of just great individual basketball play. Like in my generation of player, I really believe this. You couldn't give it to 3 of us on the court at any given time and say, we're going to stand and watch you so you create. Like anybody on that 5 that you give the ball to can create an opportunity for themselves or someone else. So, you run these light actions, and to your point, like no one's running these convoluted sets that are going to take up 16 seconds of a shot clock anymore. This is happening within the first, 10 seconds. And then you are in that situation where, all right, we got pick and roll, we got to switch. Now you got to dance, my boy. And so because these guys are so good with it, that's what winds up happening. And I don't have a problem. Stale for me isn't necessarily the standing and the watching, because to your point, that's happening. That's across the NBA. It's at some point in a team shot.
Well, for some
clock.
Teams, that's their offense.
That's their offense,
so,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So but it's not that for me. The staleness becomes about the actual touch. When you get it, is it stale by the time you decide to do what you want to do? Like, and I think sometimes Boston can fall into like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Okay, now that guy who's had the ball for a 3 count is now going to try to ice. Like, that's a stale possession for me. That's a stale touch of the ball. I like the ones where you get it, and within, I don't know, that one beat, you're either into your stuff or you're getting downhill. And I think that's what I talk about, like an offense moving a little bit.
Back to game 1 against the Lakers. Did you think, though, were you with AI? AI goes off. Kobe had a tough game. Shaq had 44. So after a 44 and 20 against the platoon of Dikembe and the Geiger counter. Did you really think
Todd McCullough, a little Big Dipper in there too?
2 minutes of Todd.
Yeah.
Did you actually leave the arena that night going, we've got this?
No, we left that arena feeling like we had stolen a game. Like kind of euphoric about that. It was a magical run. So like, I think where most of us were like, this is possible. You know what I mean? Like,
did it seem more? I mean, look, you beat them, so of course you're going to feel better about the whole thing. I love misleading game ones. I just love them.
Oh, yeah.
I need to well, I'm not going to write a book on it. It'd take too much time. But go ahead.
Look at our effort in game 2. Like in game 2, I mean, people forget that like we came to play. Like we were like going at it with them in game 2. So there was a real spirit that after getting game 1, if anyone didn't believe, like we believed. I don't think any of us ever thought that like that was going to be in the bag because we won game 1. It was more like, oh shit, like, yeah, this is doable. Like it's been a magical ride and it doesn't have to stop. Like we got game 1.
Yeah, and then Kobe balanced out the scoring, which did you look at that series saying, let Shaq go and we'll worry about the rest? Like, let's not help. I don't remember, I haven't watched it in a really long time. And the funny thing is for you, AI goes off in game 1. I think your second leading scorer had 13 points in game 1. But I imagine once the Lakers became balanced, you're like, okay, now we're an entirely different set of challenges here.
Yeah, honestly, I was so young and didn't even know if I was going to be playing. Like, I don't even think they articulated those decisions to me. It was more like go in there and chase him for 10 minutes. I was like, okay. But if I'm remembering it, like if I go back, a lot of our focus was Shaq. A lot of it revolved around Shaq and trying to stop him. I remember the game plans about going down there and trying to wrap him up and try to put a good grab on him so he couldn't get it up to the rim with you. Allen Iverson's told stories about that where he's like, he took me up to the rim with him. But that's what people fall into. And like, I've always subscribed to like a guy like, look, Shaq is going to get Shaq's. Luka is going to get Luka's. Like there's, Kobe, when it was Kobe's team, like solely, he was going to get his. We're going to pencil those in. I can't react to it in a way that puts me in jeopardy for all these, complementary pieces to have mid double figures or low 20 balls because that explodes to a number that we can't beat.
I always look at easy and hard. It's a default, like, okay, what's easy, what's hard? Like, forget the score. Like one team can be up 5, but I go, their stuff is way easier and the other team is way harder. And so Kyrie's going to have a better game. I don't expect Tatum's going to play like this throughout. There'll be probably a dud Celtics 3-point game in there and everything. But if you're just going based on an easy, hard observation post game 1, you're like, man, like it was hard for Luka. It just felt like it's the first time we've seen Dallas look like this is hard. Other than some moments against, Oklahoma City where that series, was actually pretty close despite the disappointment of the scores around SGA. So I don't know if you agree with that, disagree with it, but at least for 48 minutes, it looked like it was far more challenging for Dallas to get into their offense.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Luka is a tough shot maker, as good as there is in the league. But even within that, some nights it looks easier than others, and he was working. Like there were multiple times, and this is telling for me as an offensive player. I was watching with my wife. He'd get into his bag and he'd get deep into that paint probe, and he'd hit that little like step back, and it'd be there, and he wouldn't shoot it. And like he'd come back like to the defender. So what that tells me is like, he's working so hard that he's missing like real valid shot attempts. That these are ones that he creates every night. Like good creators know when they're open and they squeeze those off. Like make or miss. Like I've created the space. Like I've got you deep into the post. I gave you a bump. I faded. You're about 5 feet away from me. I don't see Luka turn those down. But there were multiple times last night where he got to that and he hedged at it, and then he stepped back through and rifled it to the corner. So not just the physical toll, Ryan, but like he was working mentally out there. They had him guessing a couple times. That you haven't really seen in a consistent way throughout the playoffs.
That is Raja Bell. He has his podcast that is up right now with Logan Murdoch. It's The Real Ones. They do an awesome NBA Finals preview, which still holds up with Howard Beck. So if you want to hear he and Logan get to work, check out The Real Ones podcast and please subscribe to that one as well. Always great catching up, Raja. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, brother.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address, lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. Okay, this one's a little different. It involves parenting. Sort of. 5'10", dad of 5 bod. Did you have the kids?
That's great. Dad of 5 bod.
No, but it makes
qualifier.
Sense. Snacking. You snacking a lot, Ceruti?
Huge arms.
Yes, actually. My biggest problem is snacking.
Once you had a kid, right? I hear about
I've
this,
always
the kid snacks.
It's true. I'm not I shouldn't say that. It's like everything kind of gets like thrown out of whack. So I eat like at weirder times. Like, she kind of eats and she could be picky on certain days. And that dictates whether I eat before we put her down or after we put her down for sleep. And then like if I eat too early, then I'm hungry at night. I'm not a big like if she's got some leftover chicken nuggets on the tray, like I'm not picking those up and popping them. But it just throws off like the timing of my eating schedule. And I got to cut down the snacking for sure.
I remember staying with the Longs up in Montana and Chris's brood. And we were going to have dinner a little bit later. And I was looking at what his wife was cooking up for the boys. And Waylon didn't finish some of his chicken nuggets. And I was looking at him being like, I will eat those right now. But I didn't want to say anything.
Do I have the authority to eat those chicken nuggets? No, I know Chris does, but I'm not sure where the line is.
Right. I don't.
Ryan's hanging around the table.
Them in the fridge, or is that up for grabs?
I don't think I had, despite the friendship, I don't think I had that approval rating yet. And then you never know, like, what if the kid's pattern is he
I
picks
come back
at
for
it.
the last 3 later.
Yeah, right. And then they're gone. This fucking old guys
took my fucking nuggets.
eating my nuggets. So I was kind of like looking at him thinking like, do you ask, hey, what's the deal with those nuggets? Because they were good. They were like organic.
That would have made the green light, by the way.
Yeah.
I've never seen a dino nugget that I didn't want to eat. I'll tell you that.
Dino, I think it actually was a dino nugget. And they
just
look
look
incredible.
awesome.
The breading, the whole deal. There was some leftover sauce. It may have just been ketchup, but I'm totally in on that. And so I just kind of sat there and it made me hungrier as I kept taking myself through the mental gymnastics of like, what's the move here? What's the move? But then back to the point of our guy who we're actually not making fun of. I guess I kind of did a little bit, but I have heard about this. And when I was in that moment, I'm like, okay, this is where the extra LBs start adding up because you're like, those nuggets look good. That one meatball looks good. What's going on with the French fries? He's not going to eat all of those. Let me test these out for you, buddy, before, like Cowherd did with somebody's like adult child. Well, I'll never forget. Be like, hey, what's up with Cowherd? And I go, what do you mean? I mean, that's about as open a question as you could possibly go. He's my guy, but what are you asking? And they're like, what's up with him? I'm like, well, why don't you give me your example, which would lead to that question, and I'll try to give you some sort of conclusion. He's like, we were at dinner, and he just started eating my son's French fries. And I was like, well, how old is your son? He's like 16 or 17. He's like, oh, yeah, I just went over. I was like, you know what? I actually think that's one of his endearing qualities. So
an alpha move.
There you go.
Well, there's the infamous, like he would just take we've told this before, but for those that haven't heard, he would just take one bite out of a donut, like a tray of donuts. You just take one bite and put it back.
Insane.
That's insane. A French fry is whatever, but man, we can't be, there were like knives there. You can cut a piece of the donut if you want it.
Let's ask that question though. Seriously, what is more insane? Sitting at a dinner table where you don't even really know the guy's son and you reach over without an invitation or a request and just go, I'm going to grab a couple of these fries off of someone else's plate, or the donuts that are General Pop donuts.
Community
How far
donuts.
is the reach?
Right.
How far is the reach? And does this kid know who you are? Does this kid know you're Colin Cowherd?
I'm sure he knew who he was. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I think, you know what? What are you going to do? It's Colin Cowherd. It's charges to the game. But if it's a 2-seat reach, if you're like, if you're standing up to get those fries, I think that's probably insane. But to take a bite when you've got options to slice pieces off of a donut, unless it's a jelly donut, we've been over that. I think the donut's more insane.
Well, yeah, he's ruining a donut. Like if you pick a couple fries, whatever, you can still eat the fries, and it's only one person you're really impacting. When you take a bite out of community donuts, you're kind of screwing that donut for everybody else, and it impacts like dozens of people. So it's definitely the donut.
Dozens.
Yeah,
yeah.
listen.
No, there's no way around that. You're right.
And people get really serious about like the community food. So I don't know. I think it's kind of messed up.
What was this guy's problem again?
We haven't even gotten there yet. We're off to a good start.
He's got 5 kids. That's all.
But I just have more on this. Like if Keith Olbermann reached over to grab some French fries from me, there's a problem.
Why Keith Olbermann?
We can make it anybody. We can
Craig
make it
Kilborn?
anyone.
I don't know. You might be like, wow, that's Craig.
Dan Patrick.
Craig, I would have been thrilled.
Right.
I've been telling that story. I'd be getting drinks off of that story in my 20s.
Hmm.
You see the guy on TV, be like, he stole French fries from me at one point. I don't look, Bob Costas, tons of respect. If Bob Costas reaches over and starts taking some of my French fries, it's probably going to be a discussion about it. The donut thing, I can understand the arguments because now that donut is ruined and you didn't even enjoy the full donut. Like you saw them, donuts look awesome, but some people are more strict about their diet. I think Cowherd actually was. I remember one time I was smashing a chicken parm sub because it was a lunch special deal. And I got some potato chips because that day I just decided I'm doing this. And he looks at me, he's like, white bread, cheese, chips, Russillo. Like walked away. I didn't really even know him. I was kind of like, you can fuck off. Whoa, sorry. What are you over there? 12 grain in it every day. So the donut thing was always like, what? There's a bite, and people would be enraged because then nobody was going to eat it. Although I think one time when Cowherd did do it, Golick actually bit it and then was like, oh, there's a bite out of this. And then he just shrugged in classic Golick style. It was like, whatever, gives a shit. It wasn't on the ground.
I committed.
And then when we call Cowherd out for it, he's actually a hard guy to get mad at. It's an incredible, whatever. I don't even think it's a skill he's developed. There's just people in your friend group where this person gets blamed for more shit than they should have, which is me for a good chunk of my younger life. And then there's other guys that can do way worse stuff. And it's just, whatever. So I think the radio thing, you can't even call it second-class citizens because it's probably a tier below that. But whenever we had food, whenever we had stuff, anything that made us feel a little bit more special and they were out there for everybody. And Christine Lisi would just make these absolutely absurd concoctions of like a full Snickers bar inside a brownie with also like graham cracker dusting on it. I mean, just works of art. And guys would be like, what's going on? And then TV people would hear about it and then come down and we'd be like, you can get the fuck out of here. Like, what are you, word is out in editing that radio has treats?
We have this one thing. You're not going to take this from us.
Yeah. Our entry level guys are there 10 years later in the same seat. You work in television and you think you have the right to come over? Right. Yeah. Hey, what's going on? Oh, we got a tight one in San Diego, man. I'll probably get out of here at 3. Thanks for stopping by, Russillo. And I'd just be like, oh my God. I felt so bad for those dudes late at night. I'd go to like the vending thing and just load up on $20 worth of snacks and just leave them in there if I was doing late NBA stuff. Because I'd be like, hey, man, probably going to be sitting there a while. TV, at least there's opportunity for promotion. Okay. All right. So that's how it works with treats. Back to our guy. Pickup game, can't shoot or dribble. I think we did 10 minutes on that. But I wrestled in high school. Here we go. And I know how to use my hips to box out, and I hustle on D. Maybe current Ben Simmons NBA comp. Well, you must be incredible in your off-season workouts. I did bench 275 5 times the other day, so that's got me feeling great. That's really great. That's really great. My 11-year-old daughter just finished 5th grade. At her school, kids will trade, buy, and sell items all the time. Real bizarre going on there. The elementary school. She had some items for sale, and a girl, let's call her Jane, wanted to buy the items from my daughter. My daughter and Jane didn't really get along, or don't really get along. I've heard my daughter complain about her often. Jane told my daughter she had $50 and wanted to buy an assortment of bracelets, notebooks, colored pens, and fidget spinners that my daughter had for sale or trade. This is unbelievable. Your daughter's just showing up.
Scholastic Book Fair, just in her backpack.
It's like Styles and Teen Wolf. The store value of all items considered was probably $15. Jane tells my daughter she will pay $50 for all of it. Quite the markup. Of course, she accepts the offer because it's way more than it ever cost her. I had no idea any of this happened. The day after this transaction occurred, my daughter had planned to go to a local theme park with her friends and blow all $50. Again, I had no idea she had this extra money at this point. All right, so fifth grade, we're talking 10, 11 years old. A week later, my wife gets an email from Jane's mom saying Jane stole the money from her purse and finally confessed to taking it. Jane told, I love that this girl stole money from her mom. It was like, I'm blowing it on all the essentials, bracelets and fidget spinners. Jane told her initially that she paid my daughter so they could be friends. Oh, that's sad. But now they know it was a transaction. They're asking to return the items for the $50. The money is gone. And other than blowing the money on dumb things, I don't think my daughter did anything wrong. Jane's mother said that $50 is needed to pay medical bills for their special needs child, and they really need it back.
This can't be true.
That's a tough one to argue against.
Can this be real?
Yeah, I know. Now,
medical bills.
Well, no, this isn't necessarily what the emailer is saying to us. It's what Jane's mom is saying.
Yes, I understand.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Can you verify that? Like they obviously live in.
What's the code? What's the billing code on those bills?
This is okay. So I can't help but feel like this request has me paying for her child's theft. Yet part of me thinks $50 isn't so much, so maybe I just pay and make it go away. I've asked about 8 close friends what to do, and attitudes are split down the middle. I've yet to respond to this mom's email. What should I do? I think I'd be more willing to give the $50 back if I wasn't getting this
guilt trip
level of drama thrown on the top of it. I'm not being insensitive, but my instincts here tell me that she's really laying it on about this medical bill thing to somehow make you feel worse when the motivating factor was really going to be how people are with money. I think a $50 loss because of some 11-year-olds did something weird, even though your daughter didn't do anything wrong. I think it's enough to just make it go away. That's usually what I would default to on a lot of these different things, where you're like $50 and it's no longer a thing. It's a lesson learned for all the parties involved. Kids make mistakes. $50 isn't going to ruin your week. But yeah, part of me feels like the request and being so specific about why she needs the $50 back is kind of like, oh, so you're giving me this massive sob story as if I'm not a decent human being and wasn't thinking about it. I just have a hard time thinking of the person in the friend group that's like, hey, that was the markup. Your daughter's smart. She made out. She spent the money. That's not your fault. And it isn't your fault that she stole the $50. I kind of just in me feel like the nicer thing to do would be to give the $50 back and just now it's done. Now it's just done. And you talk to your daughter about it. But again, you can't really get in your daughter's case all that much other than I remember we're trading baseball cards all the time. And there was one guy I used to just work. And I don't know what was going on. I just wouldn't give in, just worked him. And then some new guy showed up on the scene with the Beckett pricing guide. And then that was the new standard for all future transactions that we had to have it all match up in the Beckett. And I'm like, who's this fucking Beckett guy kid? He's taking away all my power. Like we actually have information on value. Like, we don't need this. Like, this isn't a salary.
Let the market handle itself.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I say it's worth what somebody wants to pay for it. Come on,
visible hand, guy.
You're taking away all my negotiating power that I've developed over years and shaved away the rough edges. So that's where I am. You guys?
I think this is a charge it to the game situation as well because being 9 years older than my brother, I never even thought about this until I was older. But parental beef sucks, even if it's not like, because now your kid is, 10, 11, 12. They're not like, they don't do the shit you tell them to do anymore. They're like, hey, can I go to John's house? Hey, can I go see what's up with Greg? They got a pool. You know what I mean? They're asking you. You're not really in charge as much as you used to be about who they hang out with. And if this is like, if you're going to have to be in, at birthday parties with this person or you're on the same softball team or whatever, that stuff it just sucks. I watched it with my brother and like the dads in his like baseball group. It's like, oh, this is crap. This sucks. No one's happy about this. And we're too far down this road for it to go, to backtrack this. So it's just going to be shitty forever. $50 sucks. But I think that's okay. I think to keep this on an even keel, especially if you don't really know how this plays out yet. Like if they are actually friends and this is going to be like, you're going to be going to the bowling alley for a 13th birthday party and you're going to be stuck there for 12 hours or, 2 hours or whatever. I think it's worth it to just pay it. And you can't say anything to your kid. Like, nice job. Way to hustle. But I think you just pay this and move on.
Yeah. Like it could be way worse. I mean, I've heard stories of like, parents' kids spending $5,000 on Fortnite skins on their credit card they didn't know about. And like, that's a problem. This
My brother
$50,
did that to me.
It's not great.
My youngest brother, when I was just starting at ESPN, it wasn't $9,000, but it was a few $100 because I'd set up his account with a credit card, and then he just started buying a ton of stuff, and I was like, "What the hell is going on?" And then he was really young. My youngest brother is a lot younger than me, so I was 30, and he was now maybe I'm 27. I forget now. So whatever it was.
Have a ton.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're talking.
dent.
He wasn't even 15. So maybe it was just because I was on TV during the Celtics thing. And the reason I bring it up is that he went to my mother and he was really young. And he just was like, I thought he was rich. He's on TV. And he wouldn't notice. That was his default. So
Not great. Well, that's a huge problem. I mean, the one thing that's in the back of my mind in all this is like, what if you guys are talking about like, this is like this incredible story and like, is it true or not? And, they're trying to maybe fleece you. And maybe we're all being suckers here. Maybe they're just making up the story. But if it is true, you're going to feel like such an asshole. Like maybe they do need the money. And if it's $50 and it's not anything to you, I just kind of think, what Kyle said, like you don't want parent drama. And then if it comes out that like they do have a kid that has some medical stuff and they need the money, and then that gets around other parent groups, like everyone's going to think you're a huge tool and not like you. So yeah, this is a classic chalk it up to the game situation. I think you just pay it. And even if you're getting fleeced, you can sleep better at night.
it does feel like another prime example of everyone else telling you what to do when they have no attachment to it whatsoever. Like it's super easy for the other person to be like, hey, those are the rules of money.
Yeah,
like who cares? Doesn't matter. Yeah. $50, fucking, hide your shit better. And then you go, yeah, well, you don't have to deal with any of these things. And who knows, maybe Jane becomes cool later on and then she becomes friends with your daughter and they room together at Bowdoin. Who knows? All things are on the table here. I think the coolest part is that kids are paying $50 markup just to be friends with your daughter because your daughter's so cool.
Right.
I used to sell my mom sandwiches pretty much every day at lunch, and I would buy hot lunch with the money every day. It's pretty awesome.
Wait, you didn't just tell your mom, hey, can I get $2 instead?
No, I don't think I was making.
If you got food at home
there.
parents, that's never gonna fly. If you got food at home parents, no fucking way are you getting your $2 for $1.85 for lunch.
Yeah, I just wasn't a big cold cut guy growing up, and some
Crazy.
dudes around like good sandwiches, and I like the grilled cheese Thursdays. So my mom, I'd sell it probably for $2, and I think hot lunch was like $1.50 back then. So you're turning a profit every week. It wasn't terrible.
Did they know?
No, definitely not.
She would be heartbroken. She would be heartbroken, his mom, if she found out.
Well, you weren't doing it 5 days a week, right?
It was pretty close. It was pretty close to it. Yeah.
My shit was weird because I'm a child of divorce and they were straight up 50-50. So like half the week, my mom was like, I'm not making you lunch. And then my stepmom was like, here's your stupid lunch bag. And it was really more the lunch bag, not the lunch that I didn't like. I just didn't. It wasn't a cool lunch bag. It was just like, it was like purple and there wasn't anything that stood out about it.
Brown paper bag it?
It wasn't an option for me, man.
Bag? Wow.
We got these awesome lunch boxes. So here you go. And it was like
Earth Day every day.
Sort of like a cooler thing, but it was, I don't know. I saw other kids' lunch boxes. I was like, this sucked. But and then half the week I was like, I'm a hot lunch guy. So I don't know. I was confused.
We had a salad bar that I used to hit up, which was perfect for me considering I was all skin and bones. It's like, what are you on a diet?
In high school?
Yeah, we had
wow.
We had a salad bar, and that used to be my move. But I mean, we weren't a great have food at home house. So I don't really know what that's about. It wasn't like we were to a level of worrying about food being on the table or something like that. But when there's a million kids, there's just a lot going on there. But yeah, every now and then, if I had a lunch that was made up and good to go, I'd have some peak lunches every now and then. But I just can't remember why. I don't know. I didn't put any weight on forever, and I wasn't helping myself. And I also would see most of the hot lunches going like, ugh, I'm not eating that.
No.
All right.
Some of them were
Let's
decent.
go.
They didn't look
What's
great,
that?
but some of them, they didn't look great. I'll give you that. But some of them were pretty good. The grilled cheese, the garlic bread one, that was pretty good. Pizza was always kind of, we had a bagel place that used to cater stuff. So when it was like, they would do bagel days and those were always really good.
Yeah. Where'd you go?
Shout out to
Connecticut.
Southern High School.
Academy over here?
Connecticut. What are you gonna do?
All right.
It wasn't Fairfield County. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Fairfield County is like, do you want sushi again today? So here we go. Why does becoming a teacher feel like giving up for a screenwriter? All right, we got a writer on our hands. I'll get straight to the point. My dilemma, 26, live in LA, a screenwriter, and have a college degree. The degree I got basically was worthless, liberal arts. Yikes. Eesh. Now, for some, though, remember, unless the degree is very specialized and tailored, like when you show up to school or at some point in school, you know exactly what you want to do. And it's specific and you're going, all right, I want to be an engineer. And then you end up in those brutal classes. I just always think for younger people, like you can get kind of caught up in what your degree doesn't mean. But there's just too many examples I have of friends of mine where there were guys that got through the business school and the guys that had liberal arts degrees and they ended up on the exact same path. And some of the guys that didn't have business degrees did way better in business. It was just a matter of, did you graduate from a decent school? And how are you in the interview? All right. So this guy says liberal arts. And I didn't know what real career I wanted going in or the couple years after graduation. So I did as much traveling as I could, Europe, Central America, making money as an English teacher and freelance writer when I could. That's awesome. Good stuff there. Being a screenwriter has been a dream I've been pursuing since 16. That's why I moved to LA 3 years ago. As it stands today, I have some finished scripts, made a couple short films, made inroads with other writers, people in the industry on my level, and even made a connection with a staff writer who said she'd be willing to help me out if I showed her an irrefutable script. Okay. This summer, I signed up for another screenwriting class to get better and meet more people. I think that's great. I know chances are slim about being a screenwriter, but it takes years of trying to break in, but it's a dream and everything that comes with that process I'm okay with and have accepted. My problem is what stable job should I get until then? Last year, I worked as a substitute, made good money for what it was, $45K, and even coached the school's basketball team. My background is in education. I like kids and the schedule's great for writers, but I know I can't be a sub forever. But at the same time, the commitment to being a real teacher and getting a credential, even if I'd be making more money and have a little more respect to the school, feels like a mental block I can't get over. I got a job as a content writer to cover myself over the summer, but only pays $30K, which is nothing in LA, and I'm not something I could live year round on. I also have a girlfriend who means the job I have actually matters a bit. She's an actor, and a nanny for a family, makes good money. So why does becoming a teacher feel like giving up? Do I need to bite the bullet and commit to getting the credential, or should I continue to just make do as a substitute? By the way, 6 foot, 195, true point guard. Love to get teammates involved, can play some defense and get to the bucket. 3-point shooting is streaky. See what he did? He changed up the timeline of the story on it.
Mm-hmm. Little Christopher
jump,
Nolan situation.
Little time jump. There's a piece of advice that I was given, and I know there's a lot of eye rolls from some of you whenever I talk about the writing part of it. That's fine. I understand. So I'm not the most equipped. Look at Kyle warming his hands up. I'm certainly, and I admit, I'm not the most equipped to try to tell you this stuff. But the advice that I was given was for wherever I was at in pursuing something I'm really passionate about. It was, you might not be desperate enough. You got here, you already had a pretty successful career, and things have gone really good. So are you actually desperate as you need to be to break in to this thing that you want to break into? And that advice has stuck with me for a long time. And I wonder, right? Because I don't really know who can just move out here and go, well, I'm going to be a writer. You almost always need something else. And you have something else that you seem like you've only talked about the teaching angle as a positive. So think of it that way. You're not doing the one thing to pay the bills every couple of weeks here that you despise and is taking away from your spare time. So I don't know if the same thing, like I wouldn't look at it with me when I was told this, it stung. Okay. It hurt a bit because I was like, that might be right. Like that might be my biggest problem is that every day is not about the one thing that I'm determined to achieve because I have something else. But your something else is not enough at 26 years old to completely shut down the screenwriting goals that you have for yourself. Okay. People without kids, like I've had a few weeks where I've had more responsibility than I've ever had in my life. And I'm thinking, wow, I actually, in my normal day to day, you have a ton of freedom to continue to work on all these other things that you want to work on outside of a job that, for whatever you want to say about sports, like there's a time demand of it, of staying on top of all the things that you're going to be talking about all the time. So this feels way more like some kind of mental block that you're creating, because the reality of it is that you still will find the time if it's important enough to you. And you don't have kids. You have a girlfriend who's in the industry, so she'll understand. So it's not that you're shutting down your dreams by potentially becoming more real as a teacher. It's that you're going to just have to be far more rigid in finding yourself those windows. Maybe it means watching one less show a night. Maybe if you're playing video games, unplug the fucking thing. Okay. Whatever those hours are in your day, when something's a priority, you can find the time to do it when you don't have kids. People that have kids, completely different category. I don't know how you do it, but you do it and you just find a way. You're tired all the time. You think there's no way you're going to get through the week with all the stuff you have to do and all the trips and all the dropping kids off and picking people up and being in charge of other human beings that can't deal with it. Like you just, as one person explained it to me, it seems impossible and remains impossible, but you get through the week and you just find a way. You don't have any of those things. There may be a time with your girlfriend where you actually end up getting married and you have a couple kids and you think, oh my God, I look back at it. Like I look back at some of the years in my 20s going, how are you not doing this then? What the hell were you doing with all of your time? And it's just whatever that clock is inside of you. But this thing has been going on since you were 16. I think the taking classes thing to continue to get better, to meet more people, like you've said a lot of really great things, but you've created, I think, kind of this imaginary roadblock that is just a label. You're changing the label of what your day-to-day is and pretending that that's going to now cut off all the other stuff that you're involved in. I just don't think that's true. It's up to you to decide how important it remains, and you will find that time because you still have it.
Can I just butt in real quick, Kyle? Because I just have a question. The one thing, it did sound like, so he brought up the fact that his girlfriend is an actress and she's a nanny. And, and then he's like, well, we have to figure out the money situation. And it almost felt like the burden was maybe on him to like, hey, do I have to maybe figure out my shit and give up on the dream or find something? So I'm just like, yeah, all things equal, like, yeah, obviously go balls to the wall and work your ass off and network and all that stuff. But I wonder if it seems like he might be feeling a little bit of pressure, like long term. Maybe this is the girl that he wants to marry. And it's like one of us needs to have like a stable career. And
we can't both have our head in the clouds.
Yeah. That I don't know. That's
but you're 26. If you're 36 sending this email in saying we want to start a family, we feel like we're behind. You're not. I really don't think most people figure it out in kind of their mid 30s anyway, whatever figuring it is out, figuring it out is, I should say, for all of us that are out there. But I just think you're adding a layer of this that's not really necessary.
Yeah, I was going to say in the beginning of this email, like, this is why people bartend in this, in big cities like this. Like, you could do 3-4 nights a week and, and if you're at the right place, supplement, a week of income. Pretty good, actually. But what Ryan said was like, it doesn't sound like you said anything bad about this. And I think we all know from our times in school, like, you're basically rolling the dice as a substitute teacher. Like, you might actually enjoy it more if you got this certification now. I don't know. I know in New York, it's pretty tough. Like, it's not just, the jump from sub to teacher is like, I think you need like a master's degree after a couple years in New York. Like, I think you can be a teacher for like 3-4 years. And if you don't get that master's, you're not certified or whatever. So I don't know how hard it is, but it sounds like, you could find some passion in this. And it's not the craziest hours, depending on what you're teaching, I think. And, you got summers off depending on the kind of job you have. So I think you could improve where you're at. And not to say this, but if it doesn't work out and you work for the state, like, shout out to like the small sliver of this country that is even eligible for a pension, bro. So, I mean, at first I was going to say bartender, but now I think maybe what is it going to really cost you time and money wise to have a little better day job while you're, while like Ryan said, you could find the time if you really need to.
OnlyFans, fired up.
Whoa, dude.
6 foot 195, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dad bought a 5.
How do you carry it, dude?
How do you carry it? I wouldn't worry about this as much as he's worrying about it, because I think this is a very common thing, that all the cool stuff that we want to do when we're younger, and then for many, that reality kicks in of like, oh man, like I might not be able to do this. And hey, I'm making pretty good money here, and now my responsibilities are a little bit better. I don't think you're there yet. I don't think you're there yet at all.
Yeah, can I change my advice? Be a bartender. It's a lot of creative types. It really is. Like you might even
run into grade papers,
dudes that meet on Thursday nights and compare notes or something. Like there's a lot of creatives in LA, service scene.
I do have fears about. Well, I would just say this: that hey, I met this person. They said if I did this or whatever. Like when somebody tells you, "Hey, send me an irrefutable script," you're like, well, fucking, that's good luck.
Yeah, you seen Baby Reindeer? Careful.
Yeah. Like, here it is. It's called Inception. Like, you know what? This isn't bad. So keep grinding, man. Keep grinding, because this has gone on too long, but I do think for the people that have that creative drive and then have the freedom, and certainly I'm also referencing myself here a little bit, I like having something that I'm just kind of kicking around, working on, looking at. And some days it doesn't happen. And then the days where you're like, oh, this might work, or this is interesting, or whatever. It's a lot of fun if you like it. It's also brutal. And if you hate it, you're like, cool, I actually don't have to do this because it doesn't really matter. But you're too young. And I don't know that the stresses on your life are to a point where you have to give up on your dream. So good luck. All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks to everybody for checking us out on Friday, which we thought was a better idea after game 1. You can see our first full episode that's up on the YouTube page. So please subscribe to that. Thanks to Oregon, Ceruti and Kyle. Ryen Russillo Podcast, Rumor Spot.